Today I'm going to teach you how to sew Aria dress. The sewing pattern is available on Etsy on Scarbeck Studio. So if you're interested, everything will be linked down below. And let's start the tutorial. My fabric of choice for this dress is rayon cotton blend. You can also use viscose, it's very similar. As you can see, it drapes beautifully and it's very inexpensive. So it's amazing for my wallet because a yard of this fabric cost me $4 and I only needed 2 yards. To make Aria dress, you'll need some bobbins and elastic thread. To wind the bobbin, I apply slight tension to the elastic thread. You'll also need normal thread, some pins, double fold bias tape, and an invisible zipper. Start by threading your sewing machine as usual. If you are a beginner and don't know how to do it, there is a video linked down below about threading a sewing machine, so go and check it out. Change machine stitch length to 0.5 and sew about 5 stitches. Then stop and change stitch length to 4.5 or more and continue sewing. The machine will make this squeaky-ish sound. It's all normal, don't worry, when using elastic thread, that's what happens. When you get close to the end of your first row, change stitch length back to 0.5 and sew about 5 stitches. This will help to reinforce the end. When I use elastic thread, I don't really like to backtrack, and in my opinion, this technique works so much better. Repeat the same sewing process for the rest of the rows and sew as many as you need. They will be 1 centimeter apart. I use needle plate as a guide. I don't really like to draw on top of the fabric, and I would actually recommend you do the same because it's so much faster and so much easier. After you finish shearing, hover a steam iron over your fabric. You'll see it will flatten, it will shrink quite a bit. In general, your fabric will shrink about 50% total. So if your fabric is, let's say, 100 centimeters wide, you will get 50 centimeters in width. Fold sheared fabric in half and cut out the front bodice on fold, and afterwards cut out sheared back piece, not on fold, only through one layer. Stay stitch the bodice all over 1.2 centimeters, or if it's easier for you, half an inch from the raw edge. Cut out the rest of the pattern pieces. Place front bodice and back bodice right sides together and pin at the side seams. At the back, because of seam allowance, there will be a little bit of fabric sticking out, just like this. It's normal, just match the notches and everything will work great after you sew a straight stitch connecting both back and front piece together. Press seam open. To attach double bias tape to neckline, cut the appropriate amount, open the tape and pin right side tape to wrong side bodice. Here I pinned right side to right side. It obviously works great, but the other way would be easier to sew. So just do it the other way. Sew along the first fold of the bias tape. Fold the bias tape and sew along the inner fold of the bias tape. Alright, now you have to repeat the same steps. So pin the bias tape to bodice, starting from the back to neckline. On the bodice, you probably notice the seam allowance that I added to the neckline and armhole. It's 1.5 centimeters, so the edge of bias tape has to be 1.5 centimeters away from the edge of the bodice. I'll have to trim the seam allowance later, but if you purchase the pattern, you will have two options, with seam allowance and without. So if you don't want to add seam allowance there, you don't have to. Fold the bias tape exactly the same way as we did it previously, and then continue sewing the tape along the inner edge to create the strap. So don't stop at the neckline, but continue sewing to create that strap. When you get to the end, keep the needle down, lift the presser foot up to rotate the strap. Lower the presser foot down again and stitch a few stitches back and forth to close that strap. And of course, trim the seam allowance. Now you have to attach back bodice A to bodice B, right sides together, and sew a straight stitch in the seam line. Then repeat the same steps on the wrong side of the fabric. As you can see here, I am pinning it, and then you have to stitch it in the seam line, the same seam line. Okay, as you can see, I also interfaced this part, but it is not necessary, so don't do it. And of course, press the seam allowance open, and then I just press it close as well. And then when you're ready, trim the seam allowance. Alright, let's work on a skirt. Connect all sides together, right side to right side, and pin. Then obviously sew a straight stitch. More detailed instructions are in the manual, so if you are confused or it's just too fast for you, just go to the manual. And of course, remember to press the seam allowance open. Then gather the skirt at the waist. I'll link the video explaining this process below. Alright, after you're done gathering the skirt at the waist, you need to pin it to the bodice, also at the waist, right side to right side. I like to pin sides, center front, and center back first, and then I spread the gathers evenly so everything looks pretty. Sew a straight stitch connecting both parts together. Also, as you can see, I overlocked the seam allowance together. This is super easy. Turn back bodice B left side out and sew a straight stitch connecting both pieces together. Trim seam allowance and corner and turn it to the right side. And that's it. It's time to attach an invisible zipper. I'll actually link the video below explaining this process, so if you want to know how to do it, just go to the video or go to your sewing manual. As always, you have to sew the rest of the side seam together. So right side to right side, pin it, and then sew a straight stitch. And of course, don't forget to trim the zipper. There will be a separate video for it as well. Press the seam allowance open. I didn't record this part, but I did overlock the hem. And as you can see here, I folded once towards the inside of the fabric and I sew a straight stitch inside this overlocked edge. It's super easy and looks super clean on the right side and on the inside of the dress. The dress is ready. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. If you want to purchase the pattern, you can go to Skarbek Studio on Etsy. And if you want to learn more, then you can follow Skarbek Studio on TikTok and Instagram. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.